So this is a representation of the sequence of events in the criminal justice system. Before we talk about it, I want to look at a couple of these notes. Down here's the source. This is a product adapted from the Challenge of Crime in Free Society by the President's Commission on Law Enforcement. And then pay attention to this note over here. This is a simplified view of how cases or offenders process through the American criminal justice system. But there's not just one system that exists in our country. Every state has a system. The federal government has a system. So the procedures, the processes, the names of different hearings or steps in the process are going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So as an example, not every state uses a grand jury process. So as we're looking at it, I want to make note on the left-hand side, we start with the crime. Not all crimes get reported. We don't learn about all crimes. So crime reported. Not all crimes that we learn about do we solve. So there's always this kind of progression from crime to actual sentencing of offenders. So it does make a note that the weights, the lines don't necessarily represent actual size caseload, but as a representation of if this big blue bar is all crime, not all crimes get reported. Of the crimes that are reported, not all of them will lead to an investigation. Some of them will not be solved or no arrest will be made. So not all investigations produce an arrest. Not all arrests lead to charges, so forth and so on. So I'll make a couple of notes of really important features. After the arrest, in this little section, we would have what's known as the booking process, where an offender is taken to the jail. They are fingerprinted, they are photographed, their identity is confirmed, and booked into the county jail. We call that booking. That's something that's I don't see anywhere on this list referencing the booking process, so that's important. The initial appearance is typically an offender's first hearing before a judge of any kind. That is going to be a magistrate judge, not a major trial court judge. A felony offender will not see a major trial judge, a district court judge, as we call them in Texas, until this step, the arraignment. So the initial appearance, you're going to do a couple things. You're going to read the charges that are that the offender was brought in for. We're going to advise them of their rights, and then you're going to set bail. The preliminary hearing is typically used in states that don't use a grand jury hearing. But a preliminary hearing is a probable cause determination. So the judge is going to determine whether probable cause exists that warrants a trial. That happens at the preliminary hearing. And then the major kind of step for felony offenders is the arraignment. Misdemeanor has the same name for the hearing. The major difference is the felony offenders being prosecuted in a court of general jurisdiction, a major trial court. So there's two big things that happen at the arraignment. Number one is the formal charges are going to be read against the offender. So in Texas, for example, we do use a grand jury system. So these are the charges that were approved by the grand jury. So we're going to read those. They might not be the same charges that were filed by the police. So, for example, the prosecutor might have read a police report and recognized a lack of evidence for some charge, so he's actually charging a different offense, or maybe a reduced version, or in some cases, an aggravated form of an offense that maybe the police didn't identify. And then the second thing we're doing at the arraignment is entering a plea. The three pleas we enter, or one of three. You can enter a guilty plea, you can enter a not guilty plea, or you could enter a no contest or nolo contendere plea. And if you enter a not guilty plea, we need a trial. Some people are acquitted. The ones that are convicted will go to the sentencing. We know about probation as a sentence, prison as a sentence. Some of those cases will be appealed. Most of them will lose their appeal, and the corrections here in yellow will be carried out. So whether you go to probation, you might go up in prison anyway, you might get out on parole, you might go back to prison. You got a small group here for capital punishment. Now, eventually, you're going to leave the system and be eligible to remain free or cycle back over here if you commit a new crime. So again, this was just a brief overview to highlight some of the steps that are going to take place from arrest, booking, the preliminary hearing, the arraignment. So make sure you're comfortable with each of these. There's a lot of discrepancies that we'll talk about from state to state. In class, we talk a lot about Texas. And this is just a generic overview. Could apply to any state, and there will be a little bit missing, a little bit added to account for just a kind of a generic view. But anyway, that's the sequence of events in the criminal justice system from crime to conviction.